Welcome to the chosen ones. When they couldn't eliminate you, they dubbed you as mystical, since nothing frightens insecure minds more than an unfathomable soul. The chosen ones. What do you call it when you escape every trap, slide through every snare, and emerge stronger from every setup than if you had never been touched? Most people call it luck. You have enemies. They are calling it sorcery. And deep down, they hope you're not from this planet. According to psychology, when individuals experience something they cannot understand, their brain develops a condition known as cognitive dissonance. That's a fancy way of saying they short-circuit and begin attributing supernatural explanations to entirely natural brilliance. So now they're looking at you like, how did they bounce back like that? Why do doors open for them without a kiss? Why are they untouched? When we had thrown everything save the kitchen sink, we reach for the pipes next. And then is when the murmurs begin. Witchcraft and dark magic aliens. Or maybe they're just fortunate. Spoiler, it is none of the above. You were just picked. But here's the kicker. You're not attempting the impossible. You're doing what was always going to happen. When someone walks in divine alignment. But to them, you seem to be doing magic tricks backstage with God. So brace up, because in this video, we're going to reveal why your mere presence scares others, how you become their most unanswered mystery, and why many who once scorned you now fear you're living a second life. This time, you arrived with instructions. Welcome to the show. And no, there is no bunny in the hat. They just cannot comprehend the evident force. Let's get to it. Number 1, your survival was never rational. It was tactical, spiritual engineering. Most people don't understand how you survived since you were intended to shatter. If someone saw it all you've gone through, the betrayals, the setups, the emotional isolation, the financial sabotage, and the spiritual warfare, they'd expect you to be crawling rather than walking. You should have crumpled beneath its weight. That is why your opponents see you as if you were playing an illusion. They know exactly what they did. They understand what they stated. They understand the traps they set. Nonetheless, you continue to stand, rise, and remain unshaken. It's not just startling to them. It is offensive. It contradicts the cause and effect formula. They've always believed that with enough pressure, they could shatter anybody. But you aren't just anybody. You were spiritually created to endure what others could not. You were not sent into chaos to be destroyed. You were put there to awaken aspects of yourself that you would not have found in luxury. Everything that was intended to harm you ended up teaching you instead. And that is exactly what they are having trouble understanding. They believed they were bringing you out, but they were unintentionally helping you prepare. They were setting the ideal circumstances for your spiritual intelligence, resilience, and inner strength to awaken. Most people rely on their intellect to manage life. You felt compelled to employ your spirit. And once you plugged into that domain, you stopped following terrestrial norms. That's when the terror began, because they are now dealing with someone who does not need affirmation, does not quiver when threatened, and does not disintegrate under pressure. Someone who does not respond as expected, who does not beg or pursue, and who perseveres even when the odds are stacked against them. So now they're whispering behind your back. They toss about terms like witchcraft, manipulation, and chance. But deep down, they realize they're watching something unique. Something they can't influence or foresee. You are not defying logic. You are live evidence that divine plan will always overcome human sabotage. You were not designed to be explainable. You were designed to be unstoppable. Also, you continue to perform things that should be impossible. That is why they are terrified. Nothing is more dangerous than a chosen one who discovers who they really are. Number 2, they did not only fail to destroy you. They accidentally polished a firearm. Your attackers did not just fail to destroy you. They ended up making you sharper. That is the portion they are grappling with. All the insults, falsehoods, humiliation, and isolation. It did not break you. It refined you. They believed they were weakening you. But every stroke served as a lesson. Each betrayal became a template. Every setback rewired your instincts. You didn't just withstand their plots. You observed them while marching through the flames. And now you're the kind of person who recognizes manipulation before it ever enters the room. They were banking on you to respond emotionally. They were counting on you to lose your anger, fall into self-doubt, or strive to prove yourself. But instead, you became silent. You began watching. You began thinking. You began seeing how people move when they believe you are weak. And in the stillness, you were deadly. Not in a loud or aggressive way, but rather in a spiritually calculated manner. You become the kind of person who cannot be baited, shook, or controlled. You became an issue they are unable to solve. What makes matters worse for them is that you did more than simply recover, you advanced. They're watching you develop, thrive, and move on, while they're still trying to find out why their traps failed. But the fact is that they never dealt with a victim. They were dealing with a weapon that was still in creation. The fire did not devour you. It formed you. And now you move with a new level of confidence. Not the sort that brags, but the kind that comes up quietly, fiercely, and shamelessly. They aren't only afraid of what you endured. They are concerned about what you have become as a result of it. You are no longer the same version of yourself that they had access to. You're sharper, smarter, less tolerant of foolishness, and more cautious of your peace. You are no longer looking for closure or answers. You've outgrown the urge to persuade others of your value. And when someone matures in this way, when sorrow becomes clarity and betrayal becomes armor, it is scary for those who believe they had broken you because they now recognize they did not stop you. They inadvertently upgraded you. Number 3, you disappeared from their grasp because they never had the real you. They thought they had you figured out. They felt they understood how to influence you, elicit emotions from you, and foresee your next move. They didn't know, however, that they were never interacting with the genuine you. They just had access to your surface, which you enabled them to view. The real you was never within their grasp. That is why they are confused right now. That's why they can't figure out how you got out of the scenarios they painstakingly planned to trap you in. They were playing chess using a decoy while the real you moved silently on an entirely separate board. This is why their tactics failed. That's why their manipulation failed. They were using strategies that are only effective on those who are completely vulnerable, yearning for approval, and emotionally dependent. But you were none of that. You were guarded. Even when you smiled, you were watching while they performed. Even while playing along, you were 3 steps ahead. You convinced them that they were winning because you knew the value of stillness, time, and self-control. When you eventually drew back, it seemed as if you had vanished into thin air. That is not magic. That is heavenly consciousness. They were attempting to destroy a version of you that was never completely there to begin with. And now they're upset because they can't get a hold of you. They can't read you. They cannot provoke you. They are unable to pull the cords that they formerly could. You're too self-aware, too advanced, and too removed from the games they're currently playing. That makes you seem menacing in their eyes. Not because you are doing anything to them, but because they understand you have outgrown every approach they used. They're now doubting what they've been dealing with all along, which concerns them since they felt they had control over you. But the reality is, they never impacted your core, the most important part of you, your soul, your vision. Your mission was concealed behind spiritual encryption. And now that they can't reach you, injure you, or figure you out, they're coming to terms with the reality. You were never in their custody. Not for 1 second. Number 4, you complete in days. It takes them decades because you're tapping into an eternal resource. You are not ahead because you are fortunate. You are ahead because you are guided. What they don't realize is that you aren't out here following trends, replicating designs, or asking for advice. You're getting downloads directly from the source, while they're spending years building something by trial and error. You get both clarity and stillness. What takes them 5 years to find out affects your spirit in minutes of alignment. That is why your achievement seems odd to them. It's impossible for you. It's wonderful timing. They don't understand how you're bypassing steps they said were necessary. How to get from underappreciated to unstoppable without playing politics or jeopardizing your ethics. The fact is that they are making progress via hard work. You're building on revelation. You are not guessing. You are being presented. You are not striving. You are being directed. Your destiny is not shaped by hustling culture. It is awakened via spiritual teaching. Moving is not the same as reacting. It's precise. That explains why doors open before you knock. That is why possibilities present themselves to you while you are not actively seeking them. It's not that you're superior. You're connected. That connection is what scares others because it implies you cannot be bought, duped, or diverted off track. Your motions originate from another dimension, one that they do not have access to. And when someone acts with that amount of spiritual power, it reveals how shallow and sluggish everyone else is advancing. They spent years establishing empires based on ego. You created yours and quietly, using holy blueprints. No one else could see you walk with the knowledge that time does not rule you. You don't worry when things take longer or doors shut. Do you understand? Delay does not imply denial. It denotes redirection. That is another reason you are accelerating. Your patience is prophetic. You don't move just to move. You wait, listen, then take a jump. And when you jump, you land precisely where you are supposed to be, not where others believe you should be. They perceive speed. What they are really seeing is obedience. Obedience to a higher frequency, voice, or call. You're not only going quickly, you're going in lockstep with destiny. And there is something no degree, relationship, or strategy can create. Number 5, you violated patents. Generations could not. And it is the true danger to them. You weren't just mending yourself. You were confronted with the weight of generations that never had the opportunity. Silence, humiliation, abuse, poverty, and self-sabotage. All of those patterns were handed down via inheritance. But you halt the handoff. You looked those generational traumas in the face and declared, "It ends with me." That was not motivating. That was war. Spiritual, emotional, and psychological conflict. You didn't simply endure it. You altered the whole frequency of your lineage. That is why your presence is disturbing. You don't just stroll inside rooms. You alter the atmosphere. You exude an aura that makes others uneasy without speaking a word, because they can sense that you're different. You are not repeating cycles. You are correcting them. You aren't acting small to protect delicate egos. You are breaching ancestral agreements via dysfunction, scarcity, and silence. And that degree of spiritual disobedience disturbs people, particularly those who profit from generational curses that remain in place. You refuse to bear what your forefathers were not permitted to question. You began questioning why. Why do we remain silent when we are violated? Why are we protecting the abuser? Why do we accept dysfunction and call it tradition? Why do we dread achievement while sabotaging peace? And these inquiries ripped through previous foundations like a wrecking ball. You did not seek permission to break the curse. You were born with the power to do so. And the instant you began living in that truth, your light became a danger to every darkness that remained hidden in your family line. That is why certain individuals in your lineage are behaving strangely around you today. This is why old pals seem distant. Because, whether they realize it or not, they can feel that you are not here to uphold the old system. You are here to demolish it. You're a walking reset button for the turmoil that formerly plagued your family. And, sure, that amount of metamorphosis is dangerous not just to demons, but also to those who mistakenly collaborate with them. But here is the reality. They had generations to accomplish what you achieved. They have a lifetime to choose freedom. You made your choice right now. And that decision altered the contract for everyone who came after you. That is not only healing. That is legacy number 6. You are not a mystery. You're like a mirror. They don't despise you because you're odd. They despise you because you remind them of all they've given up on. When you go into a room without saying anything, everyone feels vulnerable. It is not your fault. They are not responding to your personality. They're responding to their own regrets. You think on what they might have been if they had chosen healing over comfort, purpose over approbation, and progress over gossip. You're not perplexing. They just cannot lie to themselves around you. Your presence destabilizes the narratives they've constructed to justify playing tiny. You refused to settle. You did not fold. You persevered even when it was simpler to give up. And that type of endurance is unacceptable to folks who gave up trying years ago. They see you succeeding and accuse you of arrogance, while in reality it is their own reflection that makes them uncomfortable. They criticize your audacity because it reminds them of when they had it but hid it. You mirror the chosen route, the unrealized potential, the version of themselves they were afraid to become. That's not a mystery. That is exposure. Exposure hurts when you aren't ready to confront yourself. You're not bragging. You are simply showing up. However, when individuals have spent their lives avoiding the mirror, your sincerity becomes a danger. You ponder on the weight of their excuses. You show them what discipline looks like, what healing looks like, and what true freedom costs. And they understand they did not pay the same price you did. So they attempt to undermine you, discredit you, and separate themselves from you. But it is not about you at all. It's about how your light makes it difficult for them to sit comfortably in the dark. They don't want to say it, but they know if they had your courage, they'd be in a different situation. If they had your ethics, they would not be trapped. But they exchanged their anger for acceptance. They prioritized convenience above character. And now they can't look at you without experiencing the pain of what they lost. So no, you are not a mystery. You're like a mirror, and not everyone is prepared to confront what they see when you're present. Number 7. Your composition is not passive. It's war. Your work is more than simply pleasant, feel-good energy. It is a threat. It is the kind of composition that makes people anxious since it does not stem from pretending everything is okay. It comes from surviving situations that should have killed you. So when people approach you sideways, hoping to provoke you, and you answer with quiet or a steady tone, they interpret it as indifference. But this is not apathy. It is mastery. You remain cool since you have seen worse. You waged conflicts in secret that would devastate most people. So, no, you are not afraid of petty drama or small-minded insults. You've previously encountered giants. People mistake tranquility with passivity because they don't realize what it takes to get there. Your component was not given to you. It was acquired by spiritual discipline, profound self-awareness, and emotional surgery. You battled for this calm. You bled for it. You lost connections, went through sorrow, spent full seasons alone, and emerged with a tranquility that stands firm even when the wind blows. And now that you've achieved this level, people believe you're too calm, as if there's a problem. But ultimately, it's their own mess. Reacting to your equilibrium, they're still hooked to noise, searching for someone to dispute with, to prove themselves by dragging people into emotional warfare. However, you have withdrawn from that battlefield. You don't need the last word because you are the word. You don't need to respond since your writing already speaks louder than any attack. That is quiet. That isn't quiet. It's a strategy. It is power under control. Spiritual supremacy declares that I will not flinch from this folly. That is why those who operate in uncertainty, drama, and manipulation feel unbalanced around you. Your peace shows their dysfunction, your silence reveals their insecurity, and they can't take it because you won't allow them access to your energy. That right there is warfare. The ability to go into pandemonium and stay still is what makes you dangerous. Because genuine peace does not mean the absence of strife. It is a rejection to be owned by it. Number 8. You frighten them because you changed the script without authorization. They created a whole scenario around who they assumed you'd be. They called you the broken one, the failure, the one who would never get it right. They wanted that version of you to stay in place because it helped them feel better about remaining the same. You were meant to shoulder the disgrace. Keep silent. Keep your head down and carry out the script they gave you. But you had the guts to change the whole story without their consent. That's what makes them shake. Not your accomplishment, but the fact that you didn't wait for their approval before becoming someone entirely different. You moved away from the identity they gave you, and by doing so, you reclaimed the power they were feeding on. They banked on you being stranded. They invested on your quiet. You weren't just performing a part. They constructed their whole identity around you and chose to continue in that position. So when you healed, they panicked. When you discovered your voice, they felt assaulted. When you chose truth above devotion to dysfunction, they labeled you the villain. All you did was quit pretending. All you did was create your own finale. What makes matters worse for them is that you didn't even need a spotlight to do it. You were not outspoken about your transition. You were not looking for validation. You just got silent. Consistently. Authentically. Nothing scares control freaks more than someone who no longer needs their permission to breathe. You scared them by revealing how weak the whole system was. You did not just abandon the tale. They now understand they were not the author. You discovered your pen and penned chapters they had never envisaged for you. You are not meant to be here in your strength, honesty, or power, but you are. And no matter how they attempt to spin the story today, the fact of your liberation speaks louder than their words. You got out of the position. You ripped up the script and left the stage set for your collapse. That is not rebellion. That is liberty. And for others who continue to live in prisons called tradition, family, or religion, your freedom is their greatest fear. Number 9. They cannot cage you because you are multidimensional in a one-dimensional universe. They want to reduce you to something they can comprehend, something little and manageable. Perhaps a work title, stereotype, gossip, or label from your past. Something they may point to as proof of their identity. Because if they can identify it, they believe they can control it. But you continue to evolve. You keep sliding out of the boxes they've built. It annoys them to no end. They want consistency, not the genuine sword, but the one that remains stable, predictable, and controlled. But you were never designed to remain stagnant. You are a living blueprint that constantly rewrites itself. They don't know how to deal with someone who refuses to be one thing. They don't comprehend how you can be spiritual and clever, quiet and strong, creative and analytical. You're the kind of person that makes insecure people uncomfortable by challenging everything they've settled for. You're too fluid for their classifications and too complex for their surface-level chats. You aren't simply this or that. You are both and more. And in a society where individuals are taught to choose one route and stick to it for the rest of their lives, your ongoing growth seems dangerous. What people see as inconsistency is in fact progress. What they label confusing is just you being free. You do not move for performance. You move because your spirit says it's time. You shed skin. You outgrow your identities. You ended chapters before they became poisonous. That is not being unstable. That is being in sync. And those who aren't in touch with themselves will constantly see your shift as revolt. But it is not rebellion. It's a revelation. You aren't a brand. You aren't here to be marketable. You are not here to fit into a role that others find comfortable. You're a heavenly prototype, a living example of what occurs when people follow the source rather than the system. You develop not to impress, but because standing stagnant would defeat the goal. That's why they despise it. Because every time they believe they have figured you out, you disclose another layer. Not to confuse people, but because you're finally living your full potential. And wholeness cannot be contained in a box. It can only be observed. Number 10. You are defying physics because your blueprint was created before matter existed. You are not breaching the rules. They never bound you to begin with. While others are learning how to materialize or pursue alignment, you are already in alignment. You were calibrated before birth, before time was given a name, and before atoms were taught how to spin. That's why you don't fit into the frameworks that others rely on for survival. School rank, logic, and lineage do not apply to you in the same way that they do to others, since your route is not dependent on what is apparent. You were designed to follow a deeper code that existed long before physical laws were established. That explains why your life seems to move in miraculous glitches. You bypassed the steps they indicated were essential. You open doors that should have been locked. You recover from events that would ruin most individuals. You are not following formulae. You are following frequency. The natural universe is continuously attempting to compute you, but it can't, since your motion is not human-created. You're reacting to internal coordinates rather than external circumstances. And that's what people can't understand. They believe you're fortunate. They believe you are performing a trick. They suspect you're concealing a hack. But there's no trick. There's only obedience to something greater than reasoning. You do not move by sight. You move because you have an inner, unshakable certainty that pulls you when all else seems unattainable. You've relied on that knowledge more times than you can count. And every time, it makes the impossible a reality. Not because you're unique in a self-centered sense, but because you're in tune with something everlasting. People do not just gaze at you in bewilderment. They gaze because they're seeing something they've never been trained to think is true. Your life does not follow the narrative. They were reared on your peace, strength, resilience, and speed. It disrupts the scripts they live by. You resemble Houdini to them because they are still attempting to make sense of you with instruments that cannot measure spirit. But this isn't magic. It is heavenly architecture. You're not defying reality. You're demonstrating what occurs when someone realizes where they genuinely came from. That memory, that code, that plan, it's what separates you. And that is why everyone is staring. Not because you are acting, but because you are igniting something they have forgotten. A number. You do not perform miracles. You embody them. You don't push anything to happen. You become the thing that attracts what is intended for you. That is the difference. You're not out here praying for miracles or pleading for breakthroughs. When others look at your life, they perceive a breakthrough. They suspect something dodgy is going on. It's simpler for people to think you're influencing results than to understand that you're merely following a higher command. They can't understand the flow you move in because they've never known what it's like to be completely dedicated to purpose. They believe that miracles are dazzling happenings, loud, dramatic, and unusual. But your life makes miracles seem like Mondays. Not because you're attempting to prove something, but because you've learned how to create an environment in which the divine may flow freely. You don't follow signals. You live in such harmony with your calling that signals follow you. The correct doors open. The appropriate folks turn up. The appropriate shifts occur at the right moment. To the outer world. That is magic to you. It's just what occurs when your spirit is in tune with its purpose. You frighten people not because you're doing anything unusual, but because you're doing something they've never dared to attempt. Trusting purpose, overperforming but yet attempting to impress rooms, get acceptance, or compel results. You already know the secret. Alignment does not need an audience. You aren't performing for miracles. You are embodying the exact frequency at which they exist. That's why things happen to you, without the battle and show that people anticipate. You do not manifest by chanting mantras. You manifest by being the version of yourself that has already received approval from heaven. And once that version emerges, the world has no option but to react. That is not luck. That is design. They will attempt to dismiss it since admitting what you're doing is genuine. They will have to face what they have been avoiding. Most individuals cannot afford to yield for the sake of purpose. But you paid the price of quiet, in private, and now the public is asking how you keep winning. You do not perform miracles. You embody them. That is what genuinely unnerves people who are still striving to achieve what they were created to do. A number. They're terrified because you don't need them and never have. What shakes them to the core is the knowledge that you were never relying on them as they assumed. They believed you required their approval, praise, connections, or even sympathy. They believed they had control over your path, like puppeteers pulling strings. But as you went away without flinching, pleading, explaining, or fainting, they saw the truth. You were never under their power. The job was not your source. The connection was not your identity. The community was not your safety net. Those items were optional. You were always wired to stand, even if this meant standing alone. And now they're afraid. Not because of what you said, but because of what you did not have to say. You did not debate or attempt to show your merits. You did not strive to remain in places that were reducing you. You just stood back, allowing the stillness to speak for itself. That alarmed them because individuals who depend on being needed can't take seeing someone walk away unharmed. You weren't lying. You were formed differently, and your absence struck more than your presence ever did. Not because you were loud, but because you were steady. They confused your benevolence for dependability. However, being nice does not imply weakness. It is just a matter of discipline. You knew who you were even when others didn't. You let them feel they were the sun while silently growing roots that extended deep under their glare. Now that you're prospering without their approval, the reality is eating them alive. They were never the power source. They were never there to hold you up. They were just in the room as you were rising. What bothers them isn't that you're talented. It's that your talents never need their approval to flourish. That amount of self-sufficiency is unsettling for individuals whose identities are based on being needed. You've cracked the code. They cannot use shame, silence, or isolation to persuade you. You're not playing the game. You left the board. The fact that you never needed them in the first place is the one reality they can't ignore. You go through barriers that people believed were solid. They expected the barriers to stop you. They were banking on it. Limitations, red tape, and unwritten restrictions. They are meant to humble people, keep them in line, and break their spirit little. However, when you encountered those hurdles, something unexpected occurred. You did not climb over, walk around, or even knock. You just stepped through. And this shook people, because that is not how it should function. You did not seek for permission. You did not wait to be chosen. You did not network your way inside the room. You moved like you already belonged. Because you do. Not because of your credentials, wealth, or reputation, but because of your official purpose. There is a distinction between folks who hustle their way in and those who were sent. You have been sent. And when someone is deployed, human systems begin to malfunction. They thought the walls were solid since that's how they were taught. The system says, wait your turn, earn your place, kiss the ring. Yet you serve in a kingdom that does not follow those rules. Your authority is not horizontal, it is vertical. It did not stem from handshakes or hierarchies. It came from heavenly guidance. So when people see you walking through doors that should have been secured, bypassing what? Stop them. They get outraged. They believe you're breaching the rules. However, the regulations did not apply to your assignment. You aren't moving with arrogance. You're progressing in clarity. Do you know who sent you? That's why rejection won't immobilize you. This is why locked doors do not slow you down. That is why being underestimated never causes a setback. Because your guidance does not come from gatekeepers. It originates from the source. And that source does not need a committee to affirm what it has already authorized. You go past walls not to impress others, but because adherence to your purpose renders obstacles unnecessary. You do not struggle for access. You carry access with you. And for those who idolize systems, that type of freedom seems to be heresy. But you aren't here to impress the systems. You are here to shake them. And you're doing just that, one wall at a time. You are a walking expose. And that is why they are conspiring, fretting, and faking. You don't even have to speak. Your very presence changes the dynamics of the room. The energy shifted. Conversations become awkward. People avoid making eye contact. Fake laughing becomes louder. This is not your ego talking. This is the influence of heavenly clarity. Even if you don't say anything, when you come in, people begin to feel vulnerable. Why? Because you are carrying something they cannot fake. You have spiritual X-ray vision, not the sort you control or weaponize, but the kind that sees right through projection. They sense it. Oh, they feel it. They will describe you as frightening, arrogant, or too deep. But, deep down, they are not insulted by your nature. They are threatened by your perspective. They are unpleasant. Not because you're loud, but because you're articulate. Clear. People make it unclear. People are nervous. You are not nosy. You are not spying. You just carry a frequency that reveals things that others believed were concealed. Lies do not hold up around you. Masks begin to fall off. Performances fall flat. You did not ask for this, but when your soul is grounded in truth, anything untrue begins to crumble upon touch. That is why some people are suddenly too busy. Why did some individuals go from extremely pleasant to very cold? Why do you feel tense in places where you haven't spoken? They're planning against you. Not because you did anything wrong, but because you just saw too much without trying. And this scares individuals who rely on illusion to thrive. They know you see it. The manipulation, envy, and fraudulence. And they can't spin it fast enough to deceive you. Your presence convinces without preaching. It holds up a mirror. People who have formed their lives on performance are unable to cope with such intense, unvarnished reflection. So what are they doing? They pretend they are close. They portray innocence. They manufacture drama in order to divert from their exposure. When it fails, they get panicked and start plotting. Perhaps if they pull you down, they will not have to confront what you represent. But they don't grasp this. You did not come to expose them. You come to be yourself. The exposure is just a result of your sincerity. And no one can dim that kind of brightness. Not even those who can't bear to look you in the eyes. Here's the complete length. A powerful climax that brings everything together and leaves a lasting impression. You were never intended to blend in. You were designed to dispel illusions. Your entire presence defies systems, disrupts atmospheres, and exposes falsehoods without even trying. You're not attempting the impossible. You embody the unattainable in human form. People gaze at you as if you were Houdini, not because you're doing magic, but because they're observing something. They've never had the trust to achieve complete alignment. Allow them to call it luck. Let them pretend it's a coincidence. Allow people to murmur, speculate, and form hypotheses about your life. What they're seeing is evidence of what occurs when someone refuses to serve fear, tradition, and small-mindedness. You move differently because your strength varies. You do not run on ego. You run on assignment. That is why you can withstand what others can't. That's why. What happens to the others? Decades pass you by in a matter of days. That is why barriers cannot hold you. That's why false people avoid you. You are not here to perform the role that has been given to you. You've come to play the part that heaven intended for you. The fact is that your biggest danger has never been your skill. It is your clarity. You know who you are. You know where you're going. You know who sent you. And that level of clarity is scary in a society that thrives on uncertainty. Your freedom from their approval demonstrates their need on being needed. Your essay, Under Pressure, reveals their internal instability. Your adherence to purpose reveals their performance addiction. You aren't here to be liked. You are here to be liked. So, certainly, they plan panic and fake. They mislabel, misinterpret, and misjudge. But none of this will stop you since you never asked for permission. You arrived pre-authorized, pre-chosen, and pre-coded, with a blueprint created before matter ever existed. You are not breaking any systems. You're exposing that they weren't genuine in the beginning. Not for those having divine coordinates. This explains why you shake rooms without saying anything. This is why you provoke hatred without causing damage. This is why you can keep winning without cheating. Because your elevation does not come from a guy. It's from mission. You do not walk with swagger. You walk with spiritual awareness, inner power, and a peace that can wage war without raising a finger. You were never here only to survive. You were assigned to disrupt, to rewire, awaken. You do not perform miracles. You embody them. You do not beg for access. You carry it. And while you continue to pass through what they believed were solid barriers, remember that you are not a mystery. You are a mirror. And that introspection is just what the world needs. Even if it causes them discomfort, let them gaze. Allow them to speak. Let them plan. You've already gone beyond it. The blueprint is active. The system is outdated. And the selected one. You are just getting started. If this message resonates with you deeply, if it confirms something you've always knew about yourself but have never heard put into words, don't simply watch and browse. This room was created for you. You are not alone, and what you carry matters. Please do me a favor. Subscribe not just to show your support, but also to remain updated on information that speaks directly to your soul. If this video connected with you, please like it, because a single click helps spread this message to more people who need to hear it. Leave a comment below. Tell me whatever section spoke to you the most, or just mention that I am still standing. Your remarks might be the precise confirmation someone else needs. Therefore, share this with someone you know who is now going through fire with divine authority and is unaware of it. This is not simply material, it's confirmation. And as we connect, our community becomes a place where the misunderstood may finally feel seen. Thank you for watching. Now go outside and continue going through barriers. They weren't real, anyhow. God bless you.